we're going to be breaking down a seriously chilling fiction excerpt to uncover the exact mechanics of how a writer constructs visceral horror. You know that feeling, right? That heart-racing, edge-of-your-seat feeling when you read a genuinely scary story. But how often do we actually stop and look at the underlying architecture of that fear? Well, today we are going to dissect a very specific, terrifying scenario drawn directly from our source text. We're going to see exactly how tension is manufactured, piece by piece, right there on the page. So, let's dive right in and look at how this opening line instantly establishes the foundation of all great horror: absolute vulnerability. Right off the bat, the author doesn't waste any time. We are thrust immediately into the passenger seat with our protagonist, Mark. The time is 2 a.m. The location, an isolated stretch of Highway 20 in Oregon. In just a dozen words, the author has completely separated Mark from the safety of civilization, from daylight, and from any potential witnesses. This isn't just a setting, folks. It is a deliberate psychological isolation chamber.
All right, Section 1. Setting the scene, isolating the target. Let's see how the trap is laid.
These elements work together to systematically strip Mark of his situational awareness. They trap him in this photorealistic, fog-drenched, cinematic nightmare where he literally cannot trust his own senses. The thick forest fog limits his visibility, basically shrinking his entire world down to just the few feet illuminated by his headlights. And then, the author introduces the initial threat, a rusted sedan following him with its lights off. Notice that specific detail, the lights being off. It immediately signals malicious intent. I mean, this isn't just a fellow late-night traveler, right? It's a predator, deliberately attempting to remain unseen in Mark's blind spot.
Moving on to Section 2. Escalation and pursuit. The hunt begins.
This part brilliantly illustrates the illusion of control. When that shadowy vehicle matches Mark's speed, inch for inch, the author is directly playing with our fight-or-flight response. And Mark chooses flight. He steps on the gas, which is a totally rational attempt to escape the situation. But, as we know, the horror genre relies entirely on subverting our expectations of safety. So Mark's desperate attempt to flee is immediately followed by a total, unexplained failure of his vehicle. His dashboard flickers and the engine violently stalls out in complete pitch darkness. Just like that, in 3 quick narrative beats, Mark goes from having a potential escape route to becoming a static target.
Which brings us to Section 3. Complete sensory deprivation, removing lifelines.
If we break down the math of this situation, it is wild how perfectly balanced the author's trap actually is. It mathematically cuts off Mark's ability to run, to see, or to call for help. A full third of his safety, his mobility, is just gone with the dead engine. Another third, his sight, is completely neutralized by the pitch darkness and that thick forest fog. He is virtually blind and utterly paralyzed on this desolate road. And that leaves his final lifeline: communication. He grabs his phone to call 911, but the screen shows 0 service bars. As that rusted sedan silently rolls to a stop just feet behind Mark's bumper, the lack of a cellular signal grounds this terrifying fiction in a very real modern fear. I mean, we all rely on our phones as our ultimate safety net. By showing those 0 service bars, the author effectively severs Mark's last tether to the outside world. He is completely, terrifyingly alone with whatever is waiting in that rusted sedan.
Okay, Section 4, the faceless confrontation, agonizing suspense.
By mapping out the stalker's deliberate movements, we can actually feel the excruciating suspense building. Notice how the author intentionally slows down time right here. The driver's door creaks open in the dead silence. A tall figure in a heavy rain slicker steps out. But he doesn't rush Mark. Instead, he walks straight to his own trunk, pulls out a heavy metal crowbar, and drags it along the asphalt. That sensory detail, the sharp screech of metal scraping against stone, is perfectly designed to set your teeth on edge. It's calculated psychological torture before the physical threat even arrives at Mark's window. Now contrast that slow, dragging pace of the approaching stranger with Mark's frantic, panic-stricken attempts to turn over the dead engine. Mark is literally slamming his hands on the ignition key, desperately trying to get the car to start. Click, click, click. The engine just refuses to catch. This onomatopoeia is the sound of absolute helplessness. It perfectly juxtaposes the calculated, unstoppable approach of the predator with the chaotic, completely futile resistance of the prey. And here is the crucial point: the profound psychological weight of the mask itself. The shadow moves closer, stops right beside the driver's side window, and taps 3 times with the crowbar. Mark freezes. He's holding his breath as the figure bends down to align its non-existent eyes with the tinted window.
Underneath the hood of the rain slicker, the man is wearing a crude, hand-sewn burlap mask with absolutely no eye holes. This effectively weaponizes our innate human fear of a faceless, unknown threat. Without eyes, we can't read their intent, we can't appeal to their humanity, and we sure can't anticipate their next move. The entity outside the glass is no longer just a man, it's a monster.
Which leads us to our final act, Section 5, the premeditated twist, the final revelation.
Suddenly, out of nowhere, the headlights of an oncoming state trooper vehicle crest the hill ahead. The masked figure instantly turns, jumps back into his sedan, and backs down the dark highway into the trees without a single sound. The immediate confrontation ends right there. It's a phantom retreat. The physical danger vanishes just as quickly as it appeared, dissolving back into the thick forest fog, leaving Mark breathless, terrified, but alive.
But of course, the story isn't quite over. What initially felt like a random stalking incident, a terrifying crime of opportunity against a driver whose car just happened to break down, is suddenly completely recontextualized into a highly calculated, murderous ambush. When the state trooper pulls up to help, they search the road to figure out what happened, and what they find shifts the entire meaning of the narrative. Waiting in the dark just ahead of Mark's car, they find 3 perfectly set spike strips. The trooper finds those spike strips exactly 50 yards ahead of Mark's stalled car. This shows us precisely how terrifyingly close Mark was to the physical trap before his car mysteriously broke down. This single number, 50 yards, proves that the faceless man in the burlap mask had planned this entire thing. He set the trap, he waited in the dark, and he herded Mark directly toward it. Mark was playing a game he didn't even know he was a part of, and he was absolutely losing.
Which brings us to the most brilliant, unsettling mechanic of this entire fiction excerpt. The author gives us an answer about the stalker's intent, sure, but leaves a massive, glaring question completely unanswered. So, we're going to leave you with this final, terrifying thought to ponder. If the spikes were never hit, if they were still sitting perfectly intact 50 yards up the highway, what dark, unexplained force actually stopped Mark's car dead in the fog that night? Was it just sheer luck? Or was there something else out there on Highway 20? Definitely something to think about the next time you find yourself driving alone in the dark.